Okay, you guys, just want to do a follow-up to my first video about diesel heaters and mainly why we call it dry heat. I think most of the confusion is still coming from people that we're calling it a diesel heater and the type of fuel it's using, but it has nothing to do with the type of fuel. This just happens to be the type of fuel that this heater uses. Basically, on these truck campers, they have recirculating furnaces. So it's nothing to do with the fuel. It's back to diesel heaters are able to be set up to be fresh air in, and it has nothing to do with it being diesel fuel. If it was a propane fueled heater, it'd be called a propane heater. But these just type of heaters just happen to be called diesel heaters, and so that's where the term's coming from. But basically, I've got this thing set up. If you haven't watched my other video, go take a look at that video and hit like and subscribe, of course. But watch my first video. It just kind of goes through the differences in the two heaters of what they're actually doing, how they're operating, but nothing to do with the type of fuel they're running. It just happens to be this heater runs off a diesel fuel. If it ran off propane, it'd be a propane heater. But anyhow, today I was going to go through what type of how my camper's set up. So this is what I'm heating, which is a slide-in truck camper, four-wheel camper, pretty common camper. Basically no insulation, so it's really susceptible to the cold. And today we're at about 10 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's a pretty chilly day, but I've already got the heater running just so I can show you some of the sounds it makes and how it's operating and what it's doing. But basically I'm heating this space, and there's usually 3 of us sleeping in here, but you know, we sleep into about 10 degrees Fahrenheit is when we go camping is a common cold we get to. So this 2 kilowatt, which they come in 2 sizes, 2 kilowatt and 5 kilowatt. Now they're marketing some as 8 kilowatt, but there's no such thing. They're the same 5 kilowatt, so they're either labeling them wrong or they're over fueling them, which seems to be a common thing lately. So they're getting more fuel, trying to get more heat out of this heater, but eventually it will stuff itself up and it'll fail. So try to keep that in mind when you're buying them. It's pretty important to watch for the type of controller. So some of them come with automatic elevation mode, which I haven't heard if that's a good thing or bad thing, but I try to find a controller that lets me get into the custom settings, and then when I get to elevation, I can adjust those settings so it won't load up with carbon. So basically, these heaters are like little jets. They're like little furnaces. They're pretty basic. So it takes about 10 to 12 amps to get it started. It's got a glow plug, which is just a hot plug that ignites the fuel. So for about 5 to 10 minutes it'll run this glow plug, and that's when you're pulling a good amount of amps out of your battery. So that's why some of these power stations can't power these heaters, because the power station has a limit of 10 amps. And so this is pretty common we're seeing lately, is some of these power stations are not powering these heaters and people are having problems with it. So keep that in mind. So they pull about 10 to 12 amps on startup when this glow plug is ignited, and that's when your heater's getting itself up going. So it slowly just brings more fuel, and it's like a little jet engine, and it slowly brings it up. And at some point, when it gets up to full running power, the glow plug will turn off and it's self-sustaining. So all you've got is electrical to run a little pump that's pumping fuel, and you've got a little fan that just has a fan that blows the heat across the heater and into the camper. So they're real efficient once they get going, and they don't. And the other difference in your basic camper furnaces is they turn on and off. These diesel heaters do not turn on and off. Once they get to temperature inside, they go down to like an idle, they go down to low, but they do run all the time. So that's something you got to kind of know about. Pretty common, not a big deal. So it's got a different sound. Instead of a furnace turning on and off like a camping furnace turns on and off, these things will just go up to temperature and down to temperature. So you can set them 2 ways. You can set it as thermostatically controlled, so you can set a temperature in there in Celsius. Usually they don't let you go into Fahrenheit, so you've got to figure that basic math out. But basically, either run off a thermostat or you run off manual, where it's just what they call Hertz control, where you're just controlling that pump, how much fuel is injected, and that's how much heat it makes. That's how I run mine now, because I used to run it in thermostat. And you know, if you open the door, close the door, the heater will go up and down, and it probably took away from the efficiency a little bit. So I run mine manually, so when I feel like it's warm enough, I just dial it down a little bit. And it's also, which is nice, it's got a remote control right here, it's got a little remote control. I could be laying in bed and it starts getting hot and stuffy in the night. I can just click, dial it down a little bit. So it's pretty simple. Mine is in this camper. I've got it mounted right here on the floor. It's just got one duct in, and that's where we get the dry heat. So basically, fresh dry air coming in. Then I crack my vent here so everything just pushes across the camper and evacuates the condensation. So that's where you get your dry heat. Fresh, you know, like I said in the earlier video, so if you think about it, go watch my other video and be sure to like and subscribe. But anyhow, basically that's where you get your dry heat. The air outside is almost always going to be drier because you've got all these occupants inside and they're putting out condensation. You know, if you got dogs and kids and yourself, all through the night, a decent amount of moisture comes out just from your breathing. So this heater will bring fresh air in, it will circulate through the camper, and it will slowly pressurize and evacuate it out. So I don't need to run a fan. I just crack this and just the positive pressure pushes it out. So, I mean, that's kind of where I learned a lot of this. I used to build custom photographic darkrooms, so I've worked with a lot of air pressure, air movement, and humidity control. So a lot of that I've dealt with in the past and kind of understand. So, but that's basically how it works. I mean, if you had a recirculating furnace, of course you could open that fan and pull it out, but it's just not the ideal way to remove things out because it's not introducing new dry air. So, and that's where all this, you know, that's where the big kind of the debate between the two type of heat sources is. Most of the furnaces in these campers, they're recirculating the air and that moisture staying in. So it's reheating it. It's more efficient because you're just reheating the warm air. So having fresh air in like mine is going to be less efficient. So that's a trade-off. But for me, it's worth it. Having a dry camper is worth that trade-off. So furnaces, it's almost like if you had your bathroom and your shower running, you get all the steam inside. It's like having a fan circulating it, but it doesn't go. Instead, this diesel heater is pumping fresh dry air in. It's evacuating it out because it's doing complete room changes of air. So it's removing all the air in here and it's evacuating out. So, like I said, if you watch my other video, I talk a little bit more about some of the benefits and how that all works. But anyhow, this is my controller here. So basically, you control that. You can change the elevation settings and all that. And you can change the fuel mixture because when you get to elevation, you've got different oxygen levels. So you have to change the settings a slight amount. Usually when you go higher elevation, a little less fuel and a little more fan speed. So you're changing the mixture. So here's my chart. In fact, if you say something in the comments, I'll find a way to get that to you. But we've kind of tuned down to a chart. And that's the other point. You want to make sure you get a diesel heater if you ever plan on camping above sea level, that you can make these changes. Otherwise, you're going to just have issues. Especially, I've found with the 2 kilowatt, they're smaller furnace, so it's a little more sensitive to air and all that. But here's the chart. So I've gathered all these different charts over the last year or two, and this is the chart I'm using. Like I said, I could get this chart to you, but this shows you the slight changes in your fuel and RPMs and all that. So I hope that makes sense. I mean, if it gets confusing, I'll explain that. But here we are now. It's about 10 degrees outside. And I'm at about 65 Fahrenheit now inside just from running this thing for about 20 minutes. But it's just super cozy, dry heat. I mean, like I said in the other video, it's hard to explain, but it's not a patchy. It's just very well spread out heat. It's not clammy. So anyhow, it's basically, I've got a duct here. It's got a rotating thing because a lot of times I have my kids sleeping here on this deck. So I need to adjust this fan, and the dog will be sleeping on the floor here. So I can adjust the fan direction. And of course, I've got a carbon monoxide detector. In fact, I've got 2. Because I had an incident with a buddy heater that just about took us out. So that's when I went to diesel. I was using a buddy heater, and I thought all these buddy heaters were so safe, but it turns out they're not so safe. So I mean, I may make a video about that later. My diesel heater is all outside. There's no chance of any kind of exhaust getting in. It's all self-contained outside. But, you know, when I have a family, I thought I'd have 2 monoxide detectors just to be super safe. Nothing wrong with that. They're simple $15, $20 item, and I've got them in 2 different spots. So if it were to sneak in for some reason, a wind blew open, the door was open, it would pick that up. So anyhow, the monoxide detector is what saved us from the buddy heater, so that was a good thing. But anyhow, so this is where it is. 1 fresh air end vent, and it's heating this whole thing. So anyhow, let's go outside and I'll show you basically how mine's installed. But like I said in the other video, these heaters can be installed inside, outside, recirculating. There's a lot of different ways to install them, which is kind of cool about them. So it's not like we're bashing on propane furnaces. It's just a whole different deal. It's different. You know, most furnaces, I've never seen one that uses fresh air in. It's just the fresh air is for the combustion engine. That's exhausted out, but it's not brought in the camper. So they just recirculate and keep the condensation in. Mine here is pumping fresh air, but I'm going to show you outside how mine is set up. In fact, here, I'll let you, it's hard to see here, but if you look under here, in this corner, I've got it set. You see this duct right here? I've drilled mine out and I've got it set so I can do future recirculating if I get into super Arctic sub-zero temperatures. I'm going to set it up so I can do 2 different ducts, and I can do this recirculating if I wanted to. If I want to be more efficient on it later, if I turn it into recirculating, it'll be just like a propane furnace. It'll have the same condensation, but I can use less fuel, and it'll be wetter in here, but it'll be more efficient using the heat. So that I've designed for the future, but I haven't ever used it because I've got into 10 degrees Fahrenheit and it hasn't been an issue, and the dry heat is just such a bonus. And you know, you could go to a 5 kilowatt unit if you're into real cold, and that thing will just cook you out of here. It'll be so much heat you won't even need to worry about. So that's even another reason, if you had space for 5, you would never need to recirculate because it would be such good warm air coming in, you wouldn't have to deal with it, and it would be dry. It would be bone dry in here. So something to think about. I want 2 kilowatt mainly because the size of my camper, because they say a 5 can, even on low, will just overheat you out. So I've found with my 2 kilowatt, about to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and that seems to be about the limit of where it might need to go to a 5 kilowatt. If I get colder, that's probably about the limit that I feel like I've found. So, but the dry heat, fresh air in, is just the way to go. And it's, just imagine you're bringing fresh air in all the time, so you don't have people's odors, the condensation, and it's just doing a room change. So it's really pretty impressive. So anyhow, I hate to repeat things, but I'm trying to explain. A lot of people just don't quite understand how the basic differences is not the fuel, it's the type of design of the heater. But anyhow, let's go out and let me show you this, how mine's set up real basically. Okay, so on mine, I've got a separate diesel tank. So if you've got a diesel vehicle, they actually come in kits. This actually is designed to go into the tank of your diesel car, so you can tap into your diesel vehicle and don't carry a tank. This is a gas car, of course, so I'm carrying a basic 10-liter fuel tank, which is no big deal for me. It's in my swing out bumper, so it just doesn't have any problem. I've got a fuel filter. A lot of people don't even run them. It's not always necessary, but I camp a lot in the deserts of like Utah, and there's quite a bit of red Utah dust, and it can get in, and I notice my fuel tank will get kind of a little bit of dirt, so I run a fuel tank. Now these fuel tanks have a little bit of breather on it, so it has pressure, so you got to make sure that your tank breathes, otherwise you're going to have air bubbles and you're going to have problems with your heater. So also, I mean, just a small note, I carry an extra can with diesel fuel in it here, but this thing is so efficient I've never even used it. I mean, I can go for days and days with this 10-liter here. It's crazy. And when I go camping in this cold, I normally run this thing 24 hours a day. So it's real efficient, and I just like to come back to a warm camper. Okay, so anyhow, now here's my exhaust coming out. This is the sound that you're going to hear. I don't have a muffler on it right now, but I have my exhaust out by the wheel well. I've played around with it, different locations. And this turned out to be, does not pull it back in, because you got to make sure you don't pull that exhaust back into your fresh air that's pumping into your camper. Now I could put a muffler on this, and I'll try to do something later, and it'll cut down the noise. So if I'm camping next to someone, I'll pop the muffler on, just manually stick it on when I'm camping, and then I'll just pull it off when I go. But it's not required. You don't need the muffler. It just changes the sound a little bit lower. So that's the sound you're going to hear. So it's like a little jet engine. It's interesting. So anyhow, now I've got my heater. This is my custom hybrid flatbed that I've designed and built. So I've got my heater under this paddle here. This is my solar-powered RV water tank for showers and hot water. Because I do a lot of winter camping, so everything's got to be designed so it doesn't freeze up. And so I don't have plumbing inside, and I have it set up where I can be modular. But anyhow, here's the heater. So basically it's a 2 kilowatt inside, so basically it's just a smaller size, and I did not have space for much more than this. So exhaust out here, here's your fresh air duct going in, and here's the fresh air going into the heater unit. So that's why you're getting the fresh dry air coming from outside, pumping through this duct in there. So here's some blue tape covering that duct I showed you inside. So this is where I can run a duct here, and I can turn this into a recirculating heater, and then it'll be just like a propane furnace in a camper, but running off diesel. So that's my design there, is I can put a wide valve in here, but so far I haven't needed it, so I haven't installed it, but it's drilled. It's just got tape on it, but it can be done. And let's see if we can get a look inside here. Oh, remember, as I say, please like and subscribe. So I'm trying to build this up, and this is kind of a newer thing. So if you could click those buttons, I appreciate it. But anyhow. So there you go. There's my setup button. You can't really hear it, but there's like a ticking sound for the pump is kind of common, but it's so mild you can't hear it. On mine, I can hear it a little inside because it echoes through the heat duct. But that's basically what you got. Fresh air in. This is just fresh air in for the engine, for the furnace. But on this, just got a duct going here, and I've got a flapper valve, a Y valve, where I'm going to later make it so I can turn this valve, and I can add a little dry air, add a little recirculate, so tune it as I want. But so far, like I said, it's been so efficient and warm that I don't need to recirculate, and I just get pure dry air. So anyhow, that's basically how it works. It's pretty basic. Exhaust is coming under here. Originally, when I didn't have my trap doors on here, I was getting air kind of circulating back in. So once I got my trap doors on here, that cut down on any kind of exhaust getting back in. So anyhow, that's kind of the main thing. Is it's not the type of fuel, it's just called a diesel heater, but it's a fresh air in heater. That's just the big point about this. Recirculating furnaces inside, recirculate, keep the condensation, and the diesel heater pumps fresh dry air in. And it's dry here, I'm in Colorado. So of course, if you're in a super humid state, it's going to be slightly different, but in most cases, the inside is going to be a little more humid. You got people in there putting out moisture, and you know, the humidity outside is going to be the same humidity inside, so that will balance out. But adding occupants is going to be pumping out a little more water, and that's a huge difference. I've done testing, condensation testing against a furnace, buddy heater, and also in the same camper when I had a buddy heater fail. We slept in our winter sleeping bags, so we had no heat, and it was just loaded with condensation. It was unbelievable. So you'd be surprised how much condensation you put out just breathing through the night. So, but with this, like I said in my other video, so be sure to go check that video out. It explains it a little more. But this heater will dry your clothes. You can bring wet parkas, hang them off racks inside, and it will dry things out inside. It's that dry and that good at drying. And it's not like an annoying drying where it dries your throat out. It's just super cozy. but it'll evacuate itself out and it'll just dry things out. So when you wake up in the morning, you're going to have water dripping off the canvas, dripping on your face. So that's basically what it is. I hope that makes sense. But anyhow, click, subscribe, and like if you could. I'd appreciate it because this is kind of newer to me. And if you have questions, post it in there. But it's pretty basic. It's pretty simple how these little machines work. And these heaters are cheap. You know, you can buy one of these heaters for $150 US. So it's not a big expense. And they do have their issues. So I would say if you're buying one, go from a buyer that has a good policy, has good feedback, but also make sure you get a controller that'll let you adjust for elevation. Because elevation, unless you're at sea level the whole time, then you're fine to just buy it and run it. But you got to decide on your size, 2 kilowatt or 5 kilowatts. So looking at this camper, I run a 2 kilowatt down to about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So that'll give you an idea. If you're a lot larger and you've got a lot colder, then you want to go for a 5 kilowatt. And the 2 kilowatts don't give you a lot of choices because the 2 kilowatts so far, I've never seen one put in an all-in-one, they're called, where they're in a box already built. Those are pretty much all 5 kilowatts. So a 2 kilowatt tends to come in small pieces. And the way to tell the difference, if you're looking online, is a 5 kilowatt will have a 75 millimeter duct, and the 2 kilowatt have a 60 millimeter duct. So that's the main way to tell the difference in the two sizes that I've learned. I mean, there's physically different dimensions, but that's a quick, easy way to tell by the diameter of that duct. So, like I said, if you've got something larger and it's going to be colder, then think about a 5 kilowatt, because another way of doing it is you can just dump heat on a 5 kilowatt. So if you get something too big, you can put a wide damper valve in and you could just dump a little bit of excess heat. You know, and you can buy 2 and 4 port inlets. You can pop different inlets with different inlet, ducts going through your camper. So there's a lot of ways to do it. In fact, if you post up questions, let me know. But there's a lot of different ways to mount and install these. Like I said, you can install this inside, and like a normal propane furnace for recirculating, you buy what's called a turret plate. So that mounts it and gets your exhaust outside the camper, but the heater itself is inside. So yeah, that's about it. So please go ahead and hit like and subscribe, and I hope that made sense. I tend to repeat things just because it could get confusing, because I spent a lot of time on this heater. When I bought it, I didn't know anything about it, and it turned out to be a ton of work. I had problems in custom installing and getting the pressure and the elevation. But now I understand them pretty well. So if you have any questions, let me know. But like I said, click like and try to stay warm. All right, thanks for watching.